Welcome to the keynote presentation for the 2021 Massachusetts Undergraduate Research Conference. We are honored that Professor H. Zara Caldwell, Associate Professor in the Ethnic and Gender Studies Department at Westfield State University, has accepted our invitation to share her passion, life's work, and extensive knowledge in cultural and archival research. Professor Caldwell is an educator and cultural historian who teaches in the field of history, Black studies, and women's studies. Her professional and academic work is focused on unpacking and expanding the definition of resistance as discussed within the long struggle for African American freedom, particularly as it relates to African American women, artistry, and inventive activism. Fellow researchers, scholars, and all who appreciate art, culture, and activism, it is our pleasure to present the 2021 Mass URC keynote speaker, Professor H. Zara Caldwell.
I would like to open by saying how joyous and happy I am that you have asked me to join you here at the 2021 Massachusetts Undergraduate Research Conference. I'm so happy to join my voice with yours, and I'm so impressed with you. I'm going to give you a round of applause, yay, for answering the call to research, even in the middle of this awful pandemic year that we've made it through. Thank you so much for having me. I'm hoping to add to your incredible voices with my keynote lecture entitled Researching in the Moment, the Terrible, the Historical, and the Joyous. My discussion will center on Black women activists, artists who exist within a larger lineage of the struggle for Black freedom, Black activism, and the arts. I will be sharing with you today my work on pianist Hazel Scott, cartoonist Jackie Orms, and the Knoll sisters, better known as Beyonce and Solange. Maybe all presentations should end with Beyonce and Solange. These are all from forthcoming publications, and I'm going to talk to you about that. It's a discussion in 3 acts, considering particular historical moments and one that peers into a cross-section of research sources. As subjects, all of these women reveal the importance of the historical, sometimes horrible, and joyous narratives that combine in innovative research. The Oxford Dictionary defines wonder as a feeling of surprise, mingled with admiration, caused by something beautiful, unexpected, unfamiliar, or inexplicable. All these feelings washed over me when I stumbled upon the elegant pictures and read the interview of pianist Hazel Scott in an archived 1956 Ebony magazine. And there she is on your screen there. She was immediately intriguing, and her indelible image would remain with me throughout several classes, colleges, and degree programs. My enduring research journey began with this magazine and photo. The questions of her erasure nagged at me. First, if I had not been taught about her and her contributions, what else had I been denied? Second, was her story and that of so many others made possible? How were they made possible, considering the impossible odds facing African American women historically? The chasm between her representation and that found in mainstream media during her years of production, and even our own, have also troubled me. There were so many questions to answer. I would find some of these answers as a graduate student in her archive, but it all began as an undergraduate as I sat looking at this magazine. So I just pause to say that I want you to have those moments of wonder as an undergraduate researcher. And if something is nagging at you, you don't even have to know why. You don't even have to know why it's nagging at you. I want you to go deeper in, and I want you to find out why it's nagging at you like it is, because it means something specific for you in your life. Hazel Scott was a prodigy piano player by the age of 4. Already a prodigy piano player by 4. She hails from Trinidad. She moved very young to Harlem, New York. And by her early 20s, she was a veteran stage performer. She had played Carnegie Hall and had studied with the likes of Art Tatum. She hosted a weekly radio show at the age of 14 and beyond. and had a residency at the famed Cafe Society. So here I wanted to share with you really specific pictures and ephemera from her actual archive. What made me pause and gave me wonder as an undergraduate was actually very valid. You know, when I went into her archive, I could see all the amazing legacy that she left, and also again the questions of how do we go from this kind of grandeur and publicity to most people knowing nothing about her. So those were questions I had to answer. Let me tell you about some of the places she found herself as an entertainer. Some important key places, even just historically for Americans. This place here, Cafe Society, I will talk to you about that. You can see, I wanted to show you just some of the shots here. Here is Billie Holiday singing Strange Fruit, and I'll talk to you more about that in a second. I wanted to talk about just who would come to Cafe Society. And in this case, you have Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz, who were actually quite on the left, quote unquote. There's Henry Fonda as well. So let me tell you what's important about this place, for example. So the entertainment alone at the cafe warranted its packed houses. Billie Holiday sang the haunting Strange Fruit at the close of every night during her regular performances.
Bear strange fruit, blood on
in any particular month in its heyday, vocalist Lena Horne, singer Josh White, dancers Pearl Primus and Katherine Dunham, and comedian Jimmy Savo, who may not be familiar to you, but in the moment were extremely popular, could be appearing on the bill. This venue would be a launching pad for Scott and many, many others into national fame. Barney Josephson, the owner and operator of the club, wanted to provide a space that was the opposite of what he felt constituted the buttoned up and rigidly segregated atmosphere of most New York nightclubs. He hired staff, musical and otherwise, of all races. The fitting slogan for the club was the wrong place for the right people, which is pretty funny, if you ask me. The club was a downtown hub for radical left politics. People think of places like, for example, the much celebrated Cotton Club. What people don't realize about the Cotton Club is that the Cotton Club was totally segregated. So you could be a Black performer on the stage, but you could not be a Black patron in the audience. Scott fit in at the cafe with her emerging political activism, unconquerable race pride, and offstage activism. I found this as a point of joy in my research, and I hope you always find the points of joy in yours. Always look for those points of joy, always. Those things that bring you back to it again and again. The reality of collective movements and pivotal change long before what we label the civil rights movement, which actually starts long before we identified it in 1954, are palpable in the late 1930s and early 40s. In Black and interracial left circles. So there is interracial movement organizing happening. Their political and cultural activism was made necessary as a response to the terrible narrative inequity and classist, racist, sexist repression that existed and exists in America. However, the beauty, passion, and art arising from those struggles was really profound. Hollywood soon came calling, and Scott was cast in film. She continued her activism in this new frontier. Scott was challenging the tropes and imagery of African-American women that proliferated the media landscape. They were often presented as perpetual servants. Scott's contract clauses insisting on no bandanas or aprons may be curious to us today. However, for African-American performers and actors, the request was completely understandable. Take a look at some of those old films, even new films. The mammy is a fixture in films, for example. So even by those who donned them, they understood. The few opportunities for those actors have revolved around this servant type. So Scott explained, I've turned down 4 singing maid roles in movies during the past year or so. There are plenty of white performers who can play maid roles and then step into a penthouse or a school classroom. Colored performers represent their people. The most visible African American women labored in the entertainment industry, and they were very few, let me be clear. These women understood that they, whether they so desired or not, represented African American people, and more exactly, African American womanhood on the national stage. There is and continues to be an inherent political debate and tension within mainstream portrayals of African American women. You can see here something of interest just from my research that I found was Billie Holiday appears in one movie, as does Bessie Smith, by the way. And they capture both of these women really horribly in the sense of the representation that's perpetuated around stereotypes. So in Billie Holiday's case, who is Hazel Scott's godmother, by the way, she plays in one film as a maid by day and a singer by night. And you have to love Billie Holiday because she's super outspoken and she has a sharp tongue. In her biography, she explains that her whole life she worked to be not a maid. And unfortunately, she's going to play a maid in the one film that she's going to play on screen. We have a picture here of Hazel Scott and I Do'd It. And she only plays herself. That's in her contract. So she can play a glamorous representation of Black womanhood. She knows the tricks. So for Scott, the historical, the terrible, the joyous would intersect to unexpectedly stop her ascent. Her left-leaning activism, as well as her marriage to the firebrand Black Congressman Adam Clayton Powell Jr., please look him up if you don't know who he is, he deserves his own talk, brought her to the attention of the House on Un-American Activities Committee, which is already a suspect name. What does that even mean? It was also known as HUAC. Its stated goal was to root out communists and communist sympathizers in the post-World War II era. In reality, the committee was used to target Americans for a host of reasons, including radical Black activism, interracial populist organizing, and sexual orientation and identity. The committee would be the eventual vehicle for Senator Joseph McCarthy in the harrowing Second Red Scare of the 1950s. So it may sound unfamiliar to you with the name HUAC, but you should be very familiar from history class with Joseph McCarthy in the Second Red Scare, which he sat on that committee. Scott was at the height of her popularity. TV was a brand new medium, and she was the first Black American to have a show, even though people often attribute Nat King Cole with the first Black host of a show. His show didn't air actually till 6 years later. I attribute that to just the intersection of gender and race and her erasure, where people don't acknowledge her. Imagine her joy at having her own show. So 3 weeks after the premiere of the Hazel Scott Show in the summer of 1950, it was canceled. The cancellation was fallout from Scott's voluntary testimony before the HUAC committee and the accusations of communist alliance. In this slide here, I have a picture of the Hazel Scott Show. And you can see it says hear and see, which is a big deal in the moment because it's going from radio to TV. So that's how early her show is in TV history. And we have her actually sitting before the committee testifying, voluntarily, by the way, about her activities. She did take them to strong task for what she saw as just red baiting and harassment of often celebrities at this moment and any citizen that they felt like they could harass about their allegiances. Mostly they were prosecuting her for her left organizing. You can see other people who were accused, Canada Lee, Lena Horne, also Paul Robeson, and they would be listed in a book like this Red Channels book. And they would say, if you're in the book, you don't work. This ended up being the end, really the end of Hazel Scott's career as she knew it. I turn now to Jackie Orms, Zelda to her friends, Jackie Zelda Orms. She, like Scott, combined cultural production with political activism. Her engagement with the historical, the terrible, and the joyous can be spied in her radical cartooning. Her comics are a testament to art as archive and how historically marginalized communities often speak their narratives and truths via cultural production. And that's often because they don't actually even have access all the time to other things to record their truth, which is an interesting side note for archiving and research. Orms was the first syndicated African-American woman cartoonist. During her 20-year career, 20 years, Orms would create 4 comic strips centered on African-American women: Torchy, Brown, and Dixie in Harlem. We will not be seeing that, unfortunately, today. Candy, another amazing one, please look it up. Patty Jo and Ginger, which is on your screen, and Torchy and Heartbeats, which we'll talk about for a bit. Her career spanned from 1937 to 1956, and beyond, actually. And she intersected race, gender, and politics in ink. Orms worked exclusively in Black newspapers. In segregated America, these newspapers were a significant part of Black life. Their impact and reach cannot be overstated. The Pittsburgh Courier claimed to have readers of 1 million at the height of its popularity. Patty Jo and Ginger was the longest running of the 4, and she's on your screen here. The main character in the strip is a little girl with big opinions. Orms was able to speak the major issues of the day through her character's innocent musings. I want you to think about what I just talked to you about with Hazel Scott, how dangerous it was for Orms to have these very often radical statements in her cartoons. I think in some ways gender worked in her favor. They weren't looking at, oh, look at the pretty little cartoons that she's drawing. They're not paying attention enough to what she's actually saying. And she's really smart and kind of brilliant to put that into the words of a little girl. Patty Jo's ever silent teenage sister, Ginger, they're leaning against the desk. She's drawn pinup style to bring viewers' eyes in. She accompanies her in each strip. Through the one pane Patty Jo strip, Orms comments on everything from racial injustice to the unequal treatment of women to national and international politics. Her reflections are always quite innocuous, but have a severe bite. So here, just for example, is one of her cartoons from Patty Jo and Ginger. It's a letter to my congressman. I want to get it straight from Washington. Just which is the American way of life? New York or Georgia? Good question in the mid-1950s. Oh, good question today. Oh boy. You got it? That was funny, right? So this is one that is one of her most famous cartoons. In an October 8th, 1955 strip, Patty Jo walked into the living room from the kitchen and explained to her sister, I don't want to seem touchy on this subject, but that new little white tea kettle just whistled at me. This dialogue is a reaction to the 1955 murder of Emmett Till, a 14-year-old who was taken from his uncle's home, beaten to death, all for whistling at a white woman in a Mississippi shop. African Americans reacted with horror and outrage at Till's murder, and it became a touchstone for the Black community nationwide. And it marked a huge turning point for the civil rights movement. In fact, Rosa Parks even talks about thinking about Emmett Till on that bus. While Patty Jo and Ginger's strip continued its run until 1956, all drawn by hand by Orms, Orms created another dynamic woman-centered strip called Torchy and Heartbeats. This ran from 1950 to 1954. Torchy was based on the life of a single African-American woman. Torchy, who travels the world in the strip, becomes involved in a slew of adventures and practices several professions along the way. In many ways, due to her exploits, Torchy can be seen as the first, this is my argument, African-American superhero. In this undated strip, Torchy successfully defends herself against sexual assault. Orms was surely pointing to the long history of these assaults on Black women. She likely drew on cases such as that as Recy Taylor, which is a heartbreaking saga of rape of Recy Taylor. And her case dominated the Black press in the mid-1940s. Surely Orms was aware of that case just for one example. And I have here just her strip, which is beautifully drawn, by the way, and inspires many others that you may be more familiar with. And then we have from Black newspapers, again, the coverage of Recy Taylor's trial. Rather, not trial, she didn't have a trial, unfortunately, her case. Torchy pushes this guy overboard. Her life and images, again, raise questions that I am still answering. Her hidden existence in the forefront of progressive popular art as a Black woman cartoonist shows us the possibilities of history and how much work there is to be done in the historical record of the terrible and the joyous. Let us turn to the present, the cultural productions of Beyonce and Solange Knowles. Modern events are often too close to assess historically, it's true. However, I want us to examine both Beyonce and Solange in the ways in which they are in conversation with history, as well as the ways in which they convey the terrible modern backdrops for Black women, and they act as conduits for their joy as well. Solange and Beyonce's archive, like Orms, can be found in their art, but also in the current social, political movement present that is ever developing.
Hold up, they don't love you like I love you. Slow down, they don't love you like I love you. Back up, they don't love you like I love you. Step down, they don't love you like I love you. Can't you see there's no other man above you? What a wicked way.
Borrowing from Black queer culture, Beyonce makes reference to the sleigh at several points in her 2016 sonic and visual album, Lemonade. To slay is to embody excellence, to perform a feat so well that it diminishes all other endeavors. It is an example to be emulated. For Black women, the act of slaying has built into itself contestation, resistance, healing, and remaking. Something more whole rises in the place of that which has been slayed. In her song Formation, Beyonce tells her listener, slay trick or get eliminated, eschewing the misogyny attached to trick. In using a seemingly third-person voice, she uses the moniker to place emphasis on the derisive treatment of Black women in America. Beyonce understands that America's historical constructions of Black women often stand outside and apart from the constructions that they hold of themselves. She implores these women to constantly slay for survival or get eliminated. How do they function in a society in which they are perpetually treated as subhuman? They slay. In other words, they construct their own self-worth as a counter-narrative to their larger dehumanizing society. The slay is one of the several mechanisms of Black female cool. It resonates with Black feminism, and akin to cool springs from the ancient traditions and yet is shaped by modern Black present. Black feminism surfaces as an articulation of lineage and is often used as a strategy for survival. Stills from the visual album spotlight the healing of Black women that is undertaken in the project. Women holding hands at the waterfront, eating at a table that they have set for themselves, and wielding power in the form of a bat. Worcestershire, as quoted in Lemonade, says, "If we're going to heal, let it be glorious. 1,000 girls raise their arms." In 2016, students in my undergraduate class, Black Women, Black Movements, and Black Cool, furthered my research and helped me expand my canon of study as well as the definition of Black female cool. We undertook these tasks as a semester-long labor. Our conclusion was historically, Black female cool has played a role in the national understanding of Black women's positioning and standpoints. We identified musical locations such as the blues and hip hop as key and valid political spaces in which Americans heard and saw, much like Hazel Scott, Black women and interacted with their narratives. We have here my class, yay! And just some really strong images that Beyonce was very thoughtful about, I have to say, in her Lemonade video, showcasing New Orleans as a place of pride and strength. Here with this beautiful image of one of their parades. And she is here very consciously on top of this New Orleans police car. This idea that the state absolutely failed New Orleans and Louisiana during Hurricane Katrina. That's her statement. So at Beyonce's urging, our class studied the ignored beauty of the Black South and the ugly and terrible impact of Hurricane Katrina on Louisiana, her family's ancestral home. She's definitely repping for Louisiana in this Lemonade. Katrina and its devastation are purposefully referenced many times throughout the album, visually and sonically. Her art focus forced us to reckon with what had transpired for Black Americans, particularly Black women, and the disaster and the resilience that they have made a practice. Our research deduction, among other epiphanies, was that Black female cool functions both as restorative and as recovery. Solange's third studio album, A Seat at the Table, released in September of 2016, aligns with many of the concerns of Lemonade. These range from Black female interiority to a critique of American oppression. Unlike her sister, who has said that she prefers to speak mostly through her art and her music, Solange has been outspoken offstage as an artist. Within her album, she immerses listeners in an interior conversation in which Black women are presumed competent and function as witnesses and guardians of the Black community. This album provides a potent critique of American democracy and inserts itself into a very current conversation about race, gender, power, disenfranchisement, and struggle.
Well, it's like cranes in the sky. Sometimes I don't want to feel those metal eyes.
In response to her outspokenness and cultural activism, one writer labeled Solange the patron saint of Black women. They surely are in need of one. The treatment of Sandra Bland, Shakisha Clemens, Breonna Taylor, and even more recently, Dominique Remy Fells, represents the extent of Americans' animosity toward and discomfort with the Black women's body. Sandra Bland was pulled over in Waller County, Texas in 2015 by a police officer for failure to signal a lane change. His already overly aggressive interaction with her was heightened by her assertion of her rights. Bland was violently removed from her car, thrown to the ground, and arrested. Throughout the arrest, Bland voiced her protest and repeated her rights. She was booked and jailed. She tragically died 3 days later. So here, just the slide of, again, Breonna Taylor, Shakisha Simmons, Dominique Remy Fells, and Sandra Bland, all Black women who had violent interactions with the American state and also just the way they were valued. We're not sure even what happened to Dominique Remy Fells. She had a very violent death in Philadelphia. Outspoken transgender woman. But we just want to think about the ways in which Solange is speaking for and to these women. So what could they have done to receive such treatment? How do they survive in a hostile environment such as this? How does or will Black Women's Art Archive this? Herein lies the importance of a seat at the table in Lemonade. For that matter, spaces that are records of the historical, the terrible, and are used to salvage the joy of Black women. Solange and Beyonce's work brings my discussion full circle. My subjects, Hazel Scott and Jackie Orms, the Knowles sisters, inspire us all to research as living and breathing, to see research, as living and breathing, ugly and beautiful. They help us to start with wonder. Wonder in the sense of awe-inspiring wonder, as well as wonder in the sense of what happened here wonder. I just wanted to leave you with a slide of thinking about researching the under-researched subject or under-resourced or under-archived subject. How do you build an archive on those subjects? Follow the questions. Where do they lead you to? Cast a very large net of resources. Exploit those resources. How and where does that community archive? Look in less obvious places for connections. Don't forget the foreground and the background. So my research from undergraduate actually led to publication as a graduate and a professional. And that's because of my wonder and because of the value of undergraduate research. So in closing, it is no accident that I chose the terrible, the historical, and the joyous as my theme for this lecture. We are living in tumultuous, unprecedented, and extraordinary times. Those of us who have the great fortune to look back on them will thank the researchers, those preservers of history, those curers of disease, those guardians of rights and equality, and all those studied witnesses who sought solutions. And surely the college students of today are predominant among those who will secure this future. Of course you are. My hope for the undergraduate researcher is that you find that thing that nags at you, anything that is larger than yourself. Research that makes you feel small because it helps you understand the world as so very big. Research that acknowledges the terrible but does not neglect the joy. I hope that the research leads to more research, and that research to more research, and that to a seed which leads to your life's work, whether it be a historical narrative, a scientific phenomenon, a social policy, a technological innovation, or an artistic calling. I wish you the kind of discovery that reorients the understanding, our understanding, your understanding, in the tiniest and grandest ways. Thank you so much. Have a great conference.